theme, we're going to start looking at arts. So our next speaker is Adriana Cardinot, who is based in the National University of Ireland in Galway, and she's going to tell us about a project they've been working with disadvantaged and underrepresented or underreached groups in Ireland. So Adriana, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Can you all hear me well?
Hear you fine.
Yeah, perfect. So I'm just going to share my screen with you. Can you see these slides?
Yep.
Yeah,
All good.
perfect. Thank you. So good afternoon, good morning, and good evening to everyone. I think this should cover everyone who might be watching this talk. So today I'm going to be talking about one of the programs that I'm coordinating, the part of education and outreach activities, which is concerned about how we can communicate astronomy using arts. The name of the program is Making Space Program, and it's funded by the Royal Astronomical Society from the UK. And we are based in Ireland. It's a city, sorry, we're based in Galway, which is a city in the west of Ireland. And it's a lovely city, and it has a strong cultural life, which means that we have several art festivals throughout the year. So we had, for example, from a supermoon projection in the middle of the city center last year to several other art festival and music festival as well. So arts is very strong and very very presented in different ways in the city. So that's why we wanted to combine and to bring some astronomy into it. So the project that we have is basically to use different types of art. So from music to exhibitions to activity to paintings and so on to different communities. And those communities that we are targeting are the communities who usually wouldn't engage with astronomy because they are somehow socially, educationally, or economically in disadvantage in relation to others. And what I'm going to be just, oh, sorry, and the project strengths that we have three different project strengths. So education and engagement, the augmented infrastructure, and the creativity participation. And the strength that I'm going to be talking today is the education and engagement, which is the one that I'm coordinating at the moment. And within this strand, we have done several things, but the thing that we are most that we have been most doing in the past 3 years, because the project is now approximately 3 years, is about the engagement with the local communities. So we have engaged with older people, we have engaged with asylum seekers, we have engaged with the group of refugees from here, teenagers who are somehow in advantage and so on, and families as well. And the idea is to communicate different topics in astronomy using arts as a medium. And I'm going to be talking about the different types of arts that we have used. But in addition to these, we also want to support people to develop their own creative skills. So to show them that they're capable not only of creating beautiful art pieces, but also capable of learning astronomy and even being an astronomer if they want to do so. And also, and again, providing different opportunities for learning. So for those people who actually have never had an opportunity to learn about astronomy before, now they could because of our program, which I'm going to be talking more about in a few minutes. So particularly the part that I'm going to be focusing today is an intergenerational program that we have as part of our whole project. And the intergenerational program brings members of the retirement group, so other people from the local community who are somehow isolated or in other types of disadvantages, who attend a local community group called and they have a program called Young Hearts, in which they bring these older people with teenagers from a local school, and they meet once a week and they do different types of activities, so shared activities, so that the older people and the teenagers could get together and get to know. So we have two different generations in the room working together. And we partnered with them, and this was the first time that they had science and more specifically astronomy, embedded into this intergenerational program. And it was very good because we had the teenagers who are still at school, so they are still learning about different topics in physics, science in general, and astronomy. But we also have the older people who have a variety of backgrounds. So the people there, we had engineers with a PhD, we had people who unfortunately, due to several reasons, couldn't finish primary school, people who have finished secondary school, and so you can see that we have a variety of educational background. So we had to develop a shared language so that those people who doesn't have much educational background and those who have a high level educational background would still feel comfortable and engaged into the activity. And that's what we did about communicating astronomy through the arts. So some of the activities that we have done have covered a variety of topics. So some of these, which I'm going to be talking specifically about each of those. The only ones that I'm not going to be talking today is about the board castle and the games. The board castle is a museum that we have here in Ireland, in which in the last century was one of the biggest telescopes for astronomical research. And we bring this group of people there once a year so that they can get to see how the Irish astronomy was done and the big achievements that we had done. So bring closer to the reality that we have Irish people develop several important things for astronomy, so that can get closer to the local history of our country. And the games, I talked a little bit about these on my talk on Tuesday, but if anyone would like to know more, just email me. So just going over the activities. So the vastness of the university. So this was one interest topic. So on the first day that we met the group, we asked them different things that they want to know about astronomy, because we want to make something, the content of the program, interesting to them. So one of the things they were mentioned is how big is the universe? How many stars do we have? Which is a common question. Like, it's not just for this group, but I'm sure you all have come across this type of questions before if you're working with astronomy. So what we did is we had these, we worked with professional artists. So this was one of the main things that we had in our program. So we bring astronomers and artists together. So the artist involved in the group, he put this piece of paper, this layer on the table. And then we gave these little pens for the participants. So they were around the table and they could make an image using only dots, and they would go around the table and they would be going round. So every say every 10 minutes, I think, they would have to round around the table so that they could make a new image or a new drawing using only dots. So as they evolved, this was the final one. So they saw that they evolved from something like a flower to these big ones. So they could understand that it's just a matter of perspective. So depending where you are, depending on how you are looking, you can reveal a whole new world in the universe, and that's what the idea that we're trying to bring to that. So this was one good way of communicating how big our universe can be, and the variety of things that we still have to discover on it. A second one was about constellations, and the reason why we want to do this was because there was some misconceptions about astrology and astronomy, and we want to show to them that there is no relation into that. But so that's why we start talking about what is a constellation, and what is a constellation from then, and what is the effect of a constellation in our lives, and so on. And then we use the stellarium, which are the images that you have on the that you can see on the table there, and they could make their own painting, creating different, using different constellations, their piece of the sky. And then we use LED lights to mark the brightest star in the constellation. And this was very interesting and elicited different types of questions. So these are some of the art pieces that they did during the the workshop. A second thing that we talked with them was about the application of astronomy in daily life, because when we were talking with them at the beginning of the program about where they think they see astronomy in daily life, they couldn't give an example or very few examples like the GPS, and that was the maximum that they could go. So we want to provide them and get into a discussion about where we can see astronomy in daily life. So we talked about several examples, and then they did their own research, and then we started to create a big mind map with different astronomy applications. So the mind map was pretty big, and at the end, everyone contributed to this. Everyone was involved in the discussion and on writing on the paper as well. So this was a lovely way of helping the two generations to get to talk with one another, but also to exchange information. Another thing that we did, we're talking about planets and orbits. And for this one, we used clay materials. So they could use clay to create their own way of representing the planets. But it wasn't just clay that we used. We also used something called quilting. So the idea was that they would have to create their own planet using different pieces of fabrics, lines, and so on. And that's the different planets that they did at the very end. But in addition to this, they also had to write like the background of their own, the description, sorry, of their own planet. So saying what's the name of the planet, who are the people who live there, what are the resources that they have, what is the language that they speak in that planet, if there is only one language or they have multiple language, and so on. So these allowed them to put that imagination into something that was very hands-on and to create something at the very end. So you can see the different planets that they were able to create and some of the descriptions. So this one here was planet Aqua. That was created by one of the participants, and the blue color refers to the water. So it's just a planet that has loads of water and rock on it. So similar to Earth, but not exactly the same. Um, Another way that we use it to talk about planets and Earth, in addition to talking about things like how important gravity is for the formation of planets and so on, was actually to help them understanding about the planet's orbit. So then we can get into discussions, for example, about how the seasons change, what affects the seasons. So what we did, this is the artist here. So we created these activities. So we have here just wooden support, and here we had a ladder, and we put a piece of string so that we can have one string in a certain height from the floor, and we had another one here that was holding a bucket that had a hole on the bottom. And the idea of this one was that they would, sorry, I'm just trying to show, yeah. So this was the idea. So they would throw the bucket from different heights, different speeds, and then they can see how the ellipses are gonna be changing. And then we talked about it, how it would be for the elliptical movements of the planets, how they actually are, and how they would change for one planet and another. And these were some of the art pieces that they produced, trying to represent how the planets would move around the sun. So the color spectrum, we were talking about, because one of the questions that they had was, how do we know the colors of the planets, the stars, and different celestial bodies if we can't actually go there ourselves with a camera and take a picture? So how do we know about this? So what is the colors after all? So we're talking about the different color spectrum, the colors that you can see, the colors that you can't see, and so on. And we use a graffiti to create a color spectrum of the colors that we can see. And then we talked about, for example, the different wavelengths or frequencies that each of these colors have, and connecting to how we gather the information that comes from space. So this was a way of providing scientific information, but also promoting arts embedded on it. This was the final view of our graffiti. Another thing that we also talked to was about astrophotography, because some of the girls were interested in photography, and we wanted to join this inherent interest of the participants in photography with astronomy. So we brought one astronomer from the university, Dr. Ray Butler, this one here, so that he could talk about his work as an astrophotographer. And he gave several advices about softwares and the hardware, different cameras that you could use, and so on. And then we went to create our own piece of our of astrophotography using long exposure cameras. So that's one of the images that we created. And how we created was let me see if the video is gonna play. Yeah, so we created the video like this, so you can see they going around with the lights, and then the final piece that we had was this image here, so that they could understand how long exposure helps us to see the images in the sky. And then we also talked about the tides and how the moon can influence that, and the level of the water that can change. You see, because we have a big river going across the middle of the city. So we want to connect these, so the local things that they see around them with astronomy. And then they would create in paintings showing the tides and how the tides can change. And these were some of the art pieces that they used to communicate in their own view how we could see the tides changing. Another thing, and this was adapted from one talk that I saw in a conference 2 years ago, was talking about image resolution. And this was very interesting to them, so that we could talk about pixels and how each pixel has a unique color. And the idea was that they would have one image, and at the beginning they would have 4 pixels. So you can see here, 1, 2, 3, 4. So 4 pixels, and they would have to look at the image and see what is the color that best represents that pixel. So they would increase the number of pixels that they have, and then this was here the final image that they had. And this was a lovely way of talking about pixels and image resolution, and how we get the images from space as well. So we got a talk about the Hubble telescope and how to gather images and so on. So this was a very hands-on but still art activity, that they could connect scientific information with art. The last one that we were doing was about drama. And unfortunately, this was one that we didn't had much chance to continue due to the COVID. We stopped at the middle of the program, but the idea was that we are going to have a live museum, so that would be the people would be walking around and then they would be talking about the different types of astronomy pieces that we were working with them. Hopefully we're going to be continuing this one, but I just want to show, even though we didn't complete this one, but I just want to give an example of ways that you can use drama to communicate astronomy. So apart from the intergenerational program, another thing that we were doing as well is bringing the children to a local museum and helping that. And we had an astronomical exhibition as part of the program, and this was the artists involved in the exhibition. So you can see here that they have different lens and talking about image formation and how the lens for different telescopes and so on. And after they went through the museum, and by the way, this was the first time that they went to the museum. So we went to a workshop with some of the children in which they were designing their own planet. So how would they, if they would have to make a planet, how would it would look like? So you can see the different colors and the different layers that the planets would have, and they also draw how would be the person who lives in that planet. So some of the learnings that we had by using arts to communicate astronomy. So first is that you, regardless of the age, you can use arts to communicate astronomy to everyone, regardless of the background as well. Art is a very good way of conveying scientific information with a very inclusive and engaging environment. So allow us the discussion of different complex topics like gravity, for example, which seems very simple, but it's not. Also making the content accessible to everyone. And these I would recommend if anyone is hoping to develop a program about combining arts and astronomy. At the beginning, talk to the people that you are working with, see where they are coming from, so that you can have a shared language to communicate the topics, but also to develop the activities that you are going to be using. And we also use several simple art materials. So don't worry about having something very expensive or very specific. You can use very simple materials like paint and a pen and a brush, and making a lovely art activities, or even just clay. You can have lovely things done with clay as well. And the last thing that we did was to bring not just astronomy, but also the university close to everyone who participated in our program. And the arts was a very big facilitator of that. And the reason why I'm saying that is because some of the participants of our program, sorry, they have never been inside of the university, or even they go through campus, but they have never been inside of one of the buildings. And they lived here, some of those people lived here in Galway for their whole life, but they never got a chance to get into the inside of the university. So our program using arts and astronomy not only made the university accessible to them, but also making it inclusive and engaging and immersive to them, which is very important. And my last part and my final advice for people who are planning on bringing astronomy and arts together is to have a professional artist with you to develop the program and the type of activities that are most suitable for the group that you are going to work
Adriana,
with.
I'm going to have to stop you there. I think you've pretty
Yeah.
much finished anyway.
Yeah,
I
so
apologize.
I've just finished. Just leaving my contact here if anyone wants to hear more. And here is a link to a video in which we did last year that we describe our program, if anyone would like to know more about the program that we are doing. Thank you.
Yeah, I
Sorry for the
apologize.
time.
No. I didn't want to jump in because I think you make some valid and interesting points, but I know Gustavo will tell me off now. I'll be told off. I'll get a slapped wrist at some point. But thank you very much for that. It was fascinating to see the work you've been doing, and that idea of making universities part of the community is really, really important. And yeah, and I love the idea of the us justifying our existence as astronomers, because it's tricky to do it directly. But thank you very much for your talk.